Hey everybody, Dr. Phil here. This is going to be a video on globalization in the context of international business. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So what's globalization? So we think of this as a shift towards a more integrated and interdependent world economy. Nothing that comes as a surprise to anybody. There are really two facets, globalization of markets and of course the globalization of production, and to some extent the means of production. So the merging of historically distinct and separate national markets into one huge global marketplace. This is that idea of the globalization of markets. In many markets, tastes and preferences of consumers in different nations are converging on some global norm, which of course creates a global market. So we think about Coca-Cola, Pepsi, McDonald's, so on and so forth. The most global of markets are for industrial goods and materials that serve in universal needs all around the world. And some examples here, aluminum, oil, wheat, and microprocessors. So sourcing of goods and services from locations around the globe helps take advantage of national differences in the cost and quality of factors of production. It goes way back to early economics. So we think about labor, energy, land, and capital as being those factors of production. It may increase productivity, and it may improve the quality or functionality of a product to compete more effectively. So what about the globalization of production? Well, early outsourcing was primarily for manufacturing. Today, however, modern communications technology allows companies to outsource services. What about some impediments to globalization? Well, obviously, companies put up formal and informal trade barriers. There's barriers to what we call FDI, foreign direct investment, transportation costs, economic and political risk, and of course, coordinating a globally dispersed supply chain. Now, with regard to global institutions, these institutions manage, regulate, and police the global marketplace. They promote the establishment of multinational treaties to govern the global business system, and they're created by voluntary agreement between individual nation states. What about the WTO, the World Trade Organization? So this polices world trading system and ensures nation states adhere to the rules established in WTO treaties. This, of course, succeeded what we used to call GATT, which was the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. There are 164 member nations, which accounted for, as of 2023, 98% of world trade. And then the IMF, International Monetary Funds. So this maintains order in the international monetary system. This is, we often call it the lender of last resort, and it requires nation states to adopt specific economic policies in return for loans. And then, of course, most of you have probably heard of the World Bank. The World Bank promotes development using low interest loans to governments. And this is considered less controversial than the IMF. I'm sure we've all heard of the UN, United Nations. This is committed to maintaining international peace and security on the basis of the UN Charter. So it's supposed to develop friendly relations among nations, promotes cooperation in solving international problems, promotes respect for human rights. It's a center for harmonizing the actions of nations, and it includes 193 member countries. And then we have the G20. You may have also heard of like G8, G7, so on and so forth. So the group of 20, the G20. This is comprised of finance ministers and central bank governors of the 19 largest world economies plus the EU and European Central Bank. It represents 90% of global GDP and 80% of international global trade. And this became a forum for a coordinated policy response to the financial crisis of 2008 and 2009. Now, with respect to drivers of globalization, we've seen declining trade and investment barriers. International trade occurs when a firm exports goods or services to consumers in another country. Foreign direct investment (FDI) occurs when a firm invests resources in business activities outside its home country. During the 20s and 30s, many nations put up barriers to international trade and FDI to protect domestic industries. After World War II, advanced Western countries, US, UK, for example, reduced the barriers. Now, trading goods and services and the value of FDI have been growing faster than world output for many decades. By 2022, sales of foreign affiliates of multinational corporations, sometimes abbreviated MNCs, reached 33 trillion, and it's an astronomical number. The implications of fast-paced volume of world trade are as follows, and this is obviously not an exhaustive list. More companies are dispersing parts production. The economies of nation states are becoming more intertwined, so more together. and the world is becoming significantly wealthier. So what about declining trade and investment barriers? If we were to revisit that, well, some firms finding home markets are under attack from foreign competitors. That's, of course, a lot of countries now. The global financial crisis of 2008, 2009, and the drop in global output that occurred led to more calls for trade barriers to protect jobs at home. Resulting trade wars, we've certainly seen one between the US and China for a few decades now, and it also may slow the rate of globalization and production. COVID-19 global pandemic had a significant impact on global supply chains and thus on globalization. Now, what about the role of technological change? Obviously, the internet in 2022, 5.5 billion users, about 69% of global population was online, and this has certainly reduced constraints of location, scale, and time zones. We've also seen massive surges and advances in transportation technology, right? Commercial jets, super freighters, the range of those things is longer than ever. And innovation of containerization has significantly lowered shipping costs. It's lot more standardized. In the 1970s, if you think about the global economy, the US dominated the world economy and world trade. The US certainly dominated world FDI. Again, that's foreign direct investment. And then US M&Es, multinational enterprises, dominated international business. About half the world was off limits to Western international businesses. However, today, as we are probably well aware, much has changed. In the early 60s, the US was dominant in industrial power, accounting for about 38% of world manufacturing output. In 2022, the US accounts for only 25.2% of world output. Germany, France, Italy, the UK, and Canada, again, developed economies very similar to the US, have seen similar relative declines. The rapid economic growth now in countries like China, India, and Brazil, and we can think about that sort of BRICS alliance. China is the second largest economy after the US, and further relative decline in share of world outputs and exports by the US and others is most likely. So what about the changing foreign domestic investment picture? Non-US firms are increasingly investing across national borders. The increase in outward stock of foreign direct investment, total cumulative value of foreign investments by firms domiciled in a nation outside of that nation's borders, which makes sense. Cross-border flows of FDI is rising with the increasing importance of developing nations as the destination of FDI. The largest developing country recipients of FDI are China, Mexico, India, and Brazil, and of course all, emerging and burgeoning growing economies. So we think of an M&E, a multinational enterprise, as any business that has productive activities in two or more countries. So that's obviously a lot of firms. In the last 50 years, there's been a rise in the number of non-US multinationals and the growth of mini multinationals. So in the 1960s, global business activity was dominated by large US multinational corporations. However, today, the world economy is shifting away from North America and Western Europe. All right, thanks for watching the video, and I will see you all in a future video. Take care.